And with more on the battle between the executive and the judicial branch, joining me now is Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett and Peter Schweizer, the president of the Government Accountability Institute. Gentlemen, great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get your reaction to the AG. Greg.
Well, the AG is right about a variety of things, particularly, these federal judges who are issuing temporary restraining orders. Democrats and liberal groups have sprinted to their favorable venues and preferable judges. It's known derisively as judge shopping. It is highly unethical. It should be made illegal, which is why Senator Hawley is introducing a bill to stop it and also rein in these district court judges who abuse their very limited jurisdiction. Many of these injunctions against Trump have one common denominator, Maria: Democrat-appointed judges.
That's right.
They are exceeding their authority. They're contorting the law. They're usurping the power of the president, violating the separation of powers. The judiciary is a co-equal branch of government, not a superior branch. And the role of federal judges, created by Congress, by the way, needs to be revised, better defined, and circumscribed. They are issuing a ridiculous number of these universal injunctions well beyond their district authority and driven, I think, by political bias and personal animus toward Trump.
Peter, I want to get your thoughts on the same, but I also want to ask you your thoughts on the autopen of Joe Biden. This is an incredible disclosure that we all learned over the last 2 weeks, that President Biden had an automatic signature that whoever it was could sign his name to documents even if he wasn't there. Your reaction, are these pardons legitimate, given he may not have been in the room?
Yeah, I think just to add what Greg said on the nationwide injunctions, by the way, Harvard Law Review did a study last year on their use. There were 5 nationwide injunctions during the George W. Bush administration. There were 10 under Barack Obama, and in Donald Trump's first term, there were 64. This is an extension of lawfare. It started on the war on terrorism. They've now applied it domestically. They went after Trump personally. They're now going after his agenda. So that's really what's going on. And I think the Attorney General is taking the right posture. As to the autopen, look, it's not ultimately about the autopen. Was Joe Biden in a position to actually be making decisions? And there's lots of evidence. Remember what the special counsel Robert Hur said in his interview with Joe Biden. He wasn't really there. He had no sense of things that were going on. We had Speaker Johnson reporting that when he talked to President Biden in 2024 about a piece of legislation that he signed, Joe Biden didn't recall signing that piece of legislation. So it is an absolute legitimate question. Was the president actually making this decision, or is this a replay of what we had under the Woodrow Wilson administration, where he was paralyzed and his wife, Edith Wilson, was essentially running our government? And that's something that deserves investigation, absolutely.
Oh, that's unbelievable. Greg, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, look, autopens are not illegal by themselves. They've been used by past presidents dating back to Harry Truman and before, as long as there is consent by the signator. Well, what if you have a president who is so mentally infirm that he is incapable of consent? Then those documents are null and void. And even worse, Maria, what if operatives in the White House, knowing of the president's condition, decided we're just going to start issuing pardons and executive orders without even consulting him? That's forgery and fraud. Those are felony crimes. The problem, of course, is proof. I mean, you can't ask Joe Biden because he doesn't remember what he had for breakfast.
Yeah.
And you're probably not going to get the operatives who did it to confess to crimes. So you'd need some kind of a whistleblower who saw it, who heard incriminating statements made. That is exceedingly difficult. So it does, I agree with Peter, absolutely need to be investigated.
Yeah, well, I suspect that is also on the docket of AG Pam Bondi, by the way. This week, President Trump revoked the national security clearances of Joe Biden, of Hillary Clinton, of many others. Peter, your reaction?
Yeah, no, I think it's a necessary step. Security clearances have been abused massively. There are more than 1 million people that have them, and I think it needs to be trimmed down. And look, you have a problem with former intelligence officials not only injecting themselves in the political processes, as you've talked about, Maria, but they also commercialize their access to security clearances. And I think certainly it's something that could be used and abused by Bill Clinton in terms of the consultancy that he has run, WJC, for example, and others. So it's open to abuse, and I think it's high time we curtail its use. Absolutely.
I mean, you have to ask yourself, why do they need them? Kamala Harris also had her security clearance revoked. Gentlemen, great conversation. We so appreciate your time. Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett and author Peter Schweizer. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll catch up soon.
Hey, it's Will Kane. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Kane podcast for full episodes right now.